The sky above Kelthara Prime burned. Red, giant explosions lit up the darkness as enemy ships dropped bombs. From space, the beautiful crystal towers that once touched the clouds were now broken piles of glowing rock. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires across the planet's surface. Ambassador Zixthara pressed her 4 hands against the thick glass window of the underground shelter. Her blue skin flickered with patterns of fear and sadness. Outside she could see the enemy ships flying low over the city. They looked like giant metal insects, with sharp wings and glowing red eyes. "How long do we have?" asked General Mordek, his voice shaking. Zixthara turned away from the window. Her people filled the shelter, thousands of them crowded into a space meant for hundreds. Children cried in their parents' arms. The old ones sat quietly, too tired to show fear anymore. "Maybe 3 days," she said. "Our shields are almost dead. The power stations are gone. Food is running out. 3 months ago, Kelthara Prime was a happy world. Traders came from across the galaxy to buy their beautiful crystals and rare metals. Children played in parks filled with singing flowers. Artists created sculptures that floated in the air like frozen music. Then the Vorthak came. The Vorthak hegemony was an empire of bug-like aliens who conquered worlds for their resources. They had no interest in art or beauty or life. They only wanted what they could take. At first, the Keltharans thought they would be safe. They sent messages to all their friends in the galaxy asking for help. The Galactic Confederation received their calls, so did the mighty Altharian Empire and the rich trading coalition. But no help came. The Confederation said their fleets were busy fighting other wars. The Altharians said Kelthara Prime was not important enough to risk their ships. The trading coalition calculated that saving Kelthara would cost more than the planet was worth. One by one, every in the galaxy found reasons to ignore the dying world. Zixthara remembered the last transmission from the Confederation. A board official had appeared on the screen, barely looking up from his paperwork. "We regret to inform you that no military assistance can be provided at this time," he had said. "We suggest you negotiate with your attackers. Perhaps you can reach a peaceful solution." A peaceful solution, as if the Vorthak cared about peace. They had already enslaved 47 worlds. They turned living planets into empty rocks, taking everything useful and leaving the rest to die. Another explosion shook the shelter. Dust fell from the ceiling. A child started crying and his mother held him close. "What about the outer colonies?" asked General Mordek. "Maybe some of our people escaped." Zixthara shook her head. "The Vorthak found them all." Kelthara 7 stopped broadcasting yesterday. Kelthara 9, we lost contact 2 weeks ago. She had tried everything. Secret messages sent through old trade routes, bribes offered to smuggler captains, desperate pleas broadcast on every frequency her people knew. Nothing worked. The galaxy was full of advanced civilizations with powerful ships and mighty weapons, but they all had laws and treaties and trade agreements. They had to think about politics and economics. They couldn't just rush off to save strangers. "Ma'am," said a young technician running up to them. The deep scanners picked up something strange. "What kind of strange?" Zixthara asked. "Ships approaching the system, but they're not on any registry." Computer doesn't recognize their design. Hope fluttered in Zixara's chest like a small bird. How many ships? Hard to tell. Maybe 20. They're still far away, but... Ma'am, they're moving really fast. Faster than anything I've ever seen. General Mordek moved to the scanner display. His eyes widened as he looked at the readings. This can't be right. Nothing moves that fast in normal space. Could it be reinforcements? Asked. Someone from who? Zixara said bitterly. We've asked everyone. No one is coming. But even as she spoke, she felt something change in the air. The technicians were talking excitedly, pointing at their screens. The scanner showed the unknown ships getting closer and closer. They were definitely warships. Their energy signatures were huge, bigger than anything the Keltharns had ever seen, even bigger than Vorthak dreadnoughts. They're transmitting, said the communications officer. It's in Galactic Standard, but the accent is strange. Put it on speaker. Zixara ordered. Static filled the shelter. Then a rough voice broke through. Words were clear but pronounced in a way none of them had heard before. This is Admiral Sarachin of the Terran Defense Force. Any Keltharan vessels, please respond. We are here to help. The shelter went completely silent, even the crying. Children stopped. Terran whispered. General Mordek. I don't know that species. Zixara's mind raced. She had studied the histories of most galactic civilizations, but Terran meant nothing to her. Where could they have come from? Admiral Chen, she said into the communicator. This is Ambassador Zixara of Kelthara. Prime, we didn't send any distress calls to your people. We don't even know who you are. A pause. Then we know, ma'am. We picked up your broadcast anyway. Nobody should have to face extinction alone. Something in the human's voice made Zixara's skin pattern shift to color she had never shown before. It wasn't the careful politeness of a diplomat or the cold calculation of a military officer. It was something warmer, something that reminded her of how her own people talked about protecting their children. Admiral, she said, you should know what you're facing. The Vorthak have over 200 ships in the system. They've been bombarding us for 3 months. They're not known for mercy or negotiation. Another pause when the human spoke again. Her voice was harder. Dangerous. Ma'am, with respect, we didn't come here to negotiate. On the scanner, the unknown ships were now close enough for detailed readings. The Keltharan technicians gasped as the data came in. These vessels were like nothing in their databases. They were angular and brutal looking, covered in strange markings and weapon systems that radiated barely contained power. The lead ship was enormous, easily twice the size of anything the Vorthak had brought to the siege. Admiral Zixara said, there are so many of them. Are you sure you can? Ambassador, the human interrupted gently, you've been alone long enough. Just keep your people safe underground. We'll handle the rest. The transmission ended. On the scanners, the human fleet began to spread out in formation. They were heading straight for the Vorthak siege ships. Zixara stared at the display, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Somewhere in the vast galaxy, there was a species that had heard their calls for help, a people who had crossed the void to fight for strangers. She didn't know who these Terrans were or where they had come from, but for the first time in 3 months she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Admiral Krekstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death's Claw. His 6 eyes watched the tactical display with growing confusion. For 3 months, his fleet had been slowly crushing the pathetic Keltheran defenses. The siege was going perfectly according to plan. Then these unknown ships appeared. Report, he clicked, his mandibles snapping together in irritation. Lieutenant Vex Cole scuttled over to him, her antennae twitching nervously. Admiral, we count 23 vessels. Their design is unusual. The computer cannot identify their origin. Kriktar studied the readings. The ships were indeed strange. Where most civilized vessels were smooth and elegant, these were angular and crude-looking. They bristled with weapon systems that seemed almost primitive compared to modern plasma technology. Energy output, he asked. Very high, sir, higher than our dreadnoughts, but their technology appears outdated. Kinetic weapons. Instead of plasma, chemical propulsion. Instead of antimatter drives. Kriktar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Kinetic weapons, what backward species still uses metal projectiles? The Vortok were the most advanced military force in this part of the galaxy. Their plasma cannons could melt through any known armor. Their shields could stop asteroid impacts. They had conquered 47 worlds using tactics perfected over centuries of warfare. And now some primitive aliens thought they could challenge the might of the hegemony. Sir, reported the communications officer, they're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through, Kriktar ordered. A voice filled the bridge, speaking heavily accented Galactic Standard. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force carrier Indomitable Vortok Fleet. You are in violation of 17 galactic conventions and are hereby ordered to withdraw immediately. The bridge fell silent for a moment, then Kriktar began to laugh, a harsh chittering sound that made his crew step back in surprise. Terran, he said. I've never heard of any Terrans. Where do these insects think they come from? Checking databases now, sir, said the intelligence officer. I'm finding references to a species called humans from a world called Terra or Earth, but sir, they're not even members of the Galactic Confederation. Their home world is listed as developing status. Krekstar's laughter grew louder. Developing, these primitives dare to threaten us. He activated the communication system. Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Krek, star of the Vorthak hegemony. You are interfering with a legal military operation. Depart this system immediately or face destruction. The response came quickly. Admiral Krekstar, you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces. After that, we will consider you hostile and act accordingly. The Vorthak bridge crew buzzed with amusement. 30 seconds. These aliens were either brave or incredibly stupid. Sir, said the tactical officer, should we move to engage? Krekstar considered. His fleet consisted of 212 vessels, including 4 dreadnoughts and 37 heavy cruisers. The enemy had 23 ships of unknown capability. Send Squadron 7 to deal with them, he ordered. 10 cruisers should be more than enough to destroy these insects. Have them broadcast the battle on all frequencies so the Keltherans can watch their rescuers die. Squadron 7 peeled away from the main fleet in perfect formation. 10 sleek Vorthak cruisers, each one bigger than most of the human ships. Their plasma cannons were already charging, ready to turn the enemy vessels into expanding clouds of vapor. On the main screen, Krekstar watched the tactical display. The human ships were spreading out in what looked like a defensive formation. Exactly what he expected from inferior opponents. Time to engagement, he asked. 3 minutes, sir. Krekstar settled back in his command chair. This would be over quickly, then he could return to the important business of breaking Kelthara Prime's last defenses. But something was bothering him. The human ships weren't acting quite right. Instead of maintaining formation, they seemed to be moving in seemingly random patterns. Their energy signatures were fluctuating wildly, as if their power systems were unstable. Sir, said the sensor operator, I'm getting strange readings from the enemy vessels. Their shields appear to be different somehow. Different how? I'm not sure, sir. The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases, and they're launching some kind of projectiles. Projectiles. Kraxiter leaned forward, metal slugs against plasma shields. Yes, sir. But they're moving very fast. Significant fraction of light speed. Kraxiter waved a dismissive claw. Irrelevant, no kinetic weapon can penetrate modern shielding. Signal Squadron 7-2. The tactical display suddenly lit up. With new contacts, dozens of small fighters were pouring out of the largest human ship like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Fighters, Lieutenant Vex Call said. Who uses manned fighters anymore? Automated drones are far more efficient. But these weren't like any fighters the Vorta could seen. They moved with impossible agility, weaving between plasma bolts with precision no living pilot should possess. And they were fast. Faster than anything the Vorta could field. Sir, the communications officer said. Urgently. Squadron 7 is reporting contact with enemy forces. The main screen switched to view from the lead cruiser. Kraxiter watched as his ships opened fire with their plasma cannons, sending brilliant beams of superheated gas toward the human vessels. The humans scattered like leaves in a storm. But instead of running away, they were charging straight into the plasma fire. Their ships jinked and rolled with movements that should have killed any crew inside. The first human destroyer took a direct hit from a plasma cannon. Krek kept coming. Its hull was glowing white hot where the plasma had struck. But whatever material it was made from simply absorbed the energy and kept functioning. Impossible, he whispered. Then the human ships opened fire. The sound that came through the communication system was unlike anything Krekstar had ever heard. Not the clean hum of plasma weapons, but a deep thunderous roar that seemed to shake space itself. Metal projectiles, simple chunks of dense matter, slammed into the lead Vorthak cruiser at tremendous speed. The ship's shields flared and died in seconds. The projectiles punched through the hull like it was paper, sending secondary explosions rippling along the cruiser's length. Shield failure on void render, reported the tactical officer, his voice high with surprise. Hull breach on deck. 7-15, they're losing power. How? Krekstar demanded. How our primitive kinetic weapons, piercing our shields. Unknown, sir, the projectiles appear to be moving at significant fractions of light speed. The kinetic energy is enormous. On the screen, the human fighters were swarming around the Vortex ships like predators attacking wounded prey. They moved in perfect coordination, striking weak points and then vanishing before return fire could reach them, but it was the human destroyers that truly shocked Craig Star. These small ships were fighting like they had nothing to lose. One of them rammed straight through Vorthak cruiser's shield array, its reinforced prow tearing a hole in the enemy's defenses. Before the Vorthak could react, assault pods launched from the human ship and slammed into the cruiser's hull. "Sir," said the intelligence officer, "we're receiving reports from Star. Piercer, the humans are there boarding." "Us? Boarding?" Craig Star's mandibles clicked in disbelief. No one boards enemy vessels anymore, it's suicide. But the reports kept coming. Human soldiers were cutting their way through airlocks and fighting in the corridors of Vorta cruisers. They moved like demons using weapons that fired metal slugs instead of energy beams. Worse, they seemed to feel no fear at all. Within 30 minutes, 3 Vorta cruisers were dead or disabled. The remaining 7 were retreating toward the main fleet, their captains broadcasting confused reports about impossible human tactics. Craig Star stared at the tactical display, his confidence evaporating like morning mist. These weren't the actions of a primitive species, this was something else entirely. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to prepare for general engagement. It seems these humans want a real fight." But even as he gave the order, Craig Star felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest, uncertainty. Who were these Terrans? Where had they learned to fight like this? And why had they traveled across the galaxy to defend a species they didn't even know? He was about to find out. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable watching the tactical display with calm eyes. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, no panic, no shouting. Just professionals doing a job they had trained for all their lives. "Ma'am," reported Commander Torres from the weapon station, "enemy cruisers are falling back to their main fleet. We count 7 survivors out of 10. Casualties on our side?" Chen asked. "Defiant took some hull damage, but she's still fighting. Ranger lost 2 fighter squadrons. No ships destroyed." Chen nodded. The first contact had gone better than expected. The Vorta fought like most advanced species. They relied on superior technology and overwhelming firepower. They weren't used to enemies who could take punishment and keep fighting. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Park from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Ambassador Zixara wants to speak with you." "Put her through." The main screen flickered, showing the blue-skinned alien leader in what looked like an underground shelter. Her 4 eyes were wide with amazement. "Admiral Chen," she said, "we watched the battle from our scanners. How did such a small force defeat Vorthak cruisers?" Chen smiled grimly. "Ma'am, that wasn't a defeat. That was a probe. They were testing us with their weakest ships. The real fight is about to begin." As if summoned by her words, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. The entire Vorthak fleet was moving toward Them over 200 ships in perfect formation. Admiral Zixara said, her voice shaking. There are too many of them. You should withdraw while you can. You've done more than enough already. Ambassador, Chen said quietly. 3 months ago, we received your distress call. It took us that long to get here. Because Terra is on the other side of the galaxy, we didn't come all this way to run from a fight. She turned to her crew. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The enemy is bringing everything they have. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. And remember, we faced worse odds than this and won. The truth was humanity had been fighting impossible odds for centuries. When humans first reached the stars, they found a galaxy already divided up by older, more advanced species. The peaceful ones ignored Earth as insignificant. The aggressive ones saw humans as potential slaves or food. Humans had learned to survive by being tougher, meaner than anyone expected. When other species built beautiful ships that relied on advanced shields and energy weapons, humans built ugly ships that could take damage and keep fighting. When others followed ancient codes of honor in battle, humans followed only one rule. Win. Ma'am, said Commander Tors. I'm reading 4 Vorthak dreadnoughts in their formation. Those are serious ships, I see them. Chen replied, signal the fleet. Implement Plan Wolfpack. We're going to show these bugs how humans hunt. The human fleet suddenly scattered all directions to the Vorthak. It probably looked like panic. Chen knew better. Her captains were some of the best in the Terran Defense Force. They had fought against corporate fleets. During the trade wars, they had hunted pirates in the Outer Rim. They knew how to work together like a pack of wolves. Enemy fleet is closing to engagement range, reported the tactical officer. They're maintaining standard formation. Dreadnoughts in the center, cruisers on the flanks, destroyers screening. Chen studied the display. The Vorthak were fighting by the book, the same book that every civilized species used. Formations and protocols that had been refined over thousands of years. Humans had thrown that book away a long time ago. Launch all fighters, she ordered. Tell Squadron 7 to hit their left flank. Squadron 5 takes the right. I want those dreadnoughts isolated. The Indomitable began launching fighters at an incredible rate. The ship was designed around a new human doctrine. Instead of building a few enormous warships, they built carriers that could deploy hundreds of smaller craft. Each fighter was controlled by an AI, smart enough to outfly any biological pilot, but still simple enough to be mass-produced. Ma'am, said Tors. The Vorthak are launching their own fighters. Chen watched as sleek alien fighters poured out of the enemy fleet. They were beautiful machines, graceful and deadly. Each one probably cost more than a human destroyer. The 2 fighter swarms met in a chaotic furball of energy beams and missile trails. At first it looked even. Then the human fighters began to show their true nature. They didn't fight like individuals. They fought like a single organism with hundreds of parts. When a Vorthak fighter locked onto one human craft, 3 others would appear from different angles. When the aliens tried to break off and regroup, human fighters would pursue them with mechanical determination. Enemy fighter losses are mounting, reported Tors. They're good pilots, but they can't handle our coordination. Meanwhile, the human destroyers were doing something no sane captain would attempt. They were charging straight into the Vorthak formation using their fighters as cover instead of trading long-range shots like gentlemen. They were closing to point-blank range. Wolverine is engaging the lead dreadnought, called the communications officer. On the screen, Chen watched as one of her destroyers, a ship barely 1/10 the size of the alien dreadnought, opened fire at almost touching distance. Its main gun fired solid slugs of depleted uranium at a significant fraction of light speed. The Vorthak shields held for exactly 3 shots. The fourth projectile punched through and struck the dreadnought's hull. The massive ship shuddered as secondary explosions rippled along its length. "Incredible," whispered Lieutenant Park. "They're actually hurting a dreadnought with kinetic weapons." Chen had seen it before during the corporate wars. Energy shields were designed to stop energy weapons, but a solid chunk of matter moving at relativistic speeds carried so much kinetic energy that it overwhelmed most defensive systems. "Admiral," called Torres urgently. "The Vorthak are adapting. They're spreading their formation to prevent close approaches." Chen nodded. The enemy wasn't stupid. They were learning from the first exchanges and adjusting their tactics. Time for the humans to adapt to. "Signal Captain Martinez on the Relentless," she ordered. "Tell him to implement Plan Berserker." Across the battlefield, the human heavy cruiser Relentless suddenly accelerated toward the Vorthak center. But instead of firing its weapons, it began broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Captain Martinez. My engines are damaged and my ship is out of control. I'm going to ram the nearest enemy vessel. All hands brace for impact." The Vorthak dreadnought tried to move out of the way, but the Relentless was moving too fast. At the last second, the human ship fired its full load of nuclear missiles at point-blank range. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, the Vorthak dreadnought was a broken hulk. The Relentless was gone too. But Chen knew that Captain Martinez and his crew had made it to the escape pods just before impact. "Ma'am," said Torres, "the enemy formation is breaking up. They're not used to opponents who use ramming attacks." Chen smiled coldly. That was the difference between humans and most other species. When civilized aliens fought, they tried to minimize losses and preserve expensive equipment. Humans fought to win, regardless of the cost. "All ships," she broadcast, "the enemy is wavering. Press the attack. Show them what happens when they threaten innocent people." The human fleet surged forward like a pack of hungry wolves. They had traveled across the galaxy to answer a call for help from strangers. Now they were going to finish what the Vorthak had started. The real battle was just beginning. The Battle of Kalthara's Tears began at 3:47 ship time and lasted 7 hours. Historians would later call it the most vicious space combat ever recorded. Vorthak called it the day they learned that some species fight like they have nothing left to lose. Admiral Krekstar watched in growing horror as his carefully organized fleet fell apart. The humans weren't fighting like any civilized species. They ignored every rule of proper warfare, using tactics that ranged from brilliant to completely insane. "Report," he clicked, his mandibles snapping with stress. "Void Piercer is down," reported his Tactical officer, the humans are using some kind of gravity weapon. They're creating artificial gravity wells that pull our ships out of formation. On the main screen, Krexstar could see human destroyers darting between his heavy cruisers like fighters, but these weren't normal destroyers. They carried devices that bent space itself, creating pockets of intense gravity that dragged Vortok ships into collision courses. Death Talon reports boarding parties called another officer. The humans are launching assault pods directly through our hulls. Krexstar couldn't believe what he was hearing. Modern warfare didn't include boarding action. Ships fought at long range with energy weapons and guided missiles. Only primitives engaged in close combat, but the humans seemed to prefer close combat. Their assault pods were essentially missiles with troops inside. They would ram through a ship's hull at high speed, then disgorge soldiers who fought with an intensity that shocked even hardened Vortok warriors. "Sir," said the communications officer, "Captain Jextall is requesting immediate assistance. He says the human soldiers are different. How? They don't seem to feel fear." "Sir, our troops shot one of them 3 times, and he kept fighting until his squadmates could treat his wounds. They're using kinetic weapons that punch through our armor like it's soft metal." Krexstar had seen recordings from the boarded ships. Human soldiers moved through Vortok corridors like they owned them. They wore heavy armor that made them look like metal giants, and they carried weapons that fired solid slugs at enormous velocity. But it wasn't just their equipment that was terrifying. It was their attitude. Vortok warriors fought for glory and conquest. These humans fought like they were defending their own children. "Admiral," called the sensor operator, "the human carrier is launching more fighters. I count by the void. I count over 300 small craft. The Indomitable had opened every bay and was disgorging swarms of unmanned fighters. Each one was controlled by an artificial intelligence that learned from every engagement. As the battle progressed, they became more and more effective. How many fighters can one ship carry?" Krexstar demanded. "Unknown, sir. Our largest carriers hold maybe 50 manned fighters, but these are smaller, simpler craft. The humans seem to prefer quantity over quality." That wasn't quite true. The human fighters were individually weaker than Vortok craft, but they worked together with perfect coordination. A single Vortok pilot might outfly any one human fighter, but no single pilot could handle 6 A-controlled craft attacking from different angles. "Sir," the tactical officer's voice cracked with strain, "Dominion's fist is requesting emergency assistance. They're reporting multiple hull breaches and engine failure." On the tactical display, Krexstar could see one of his dreadnoughts listing badly, atmosphere streaming from dozens of holes in its hull. Human fighters swarmed around it like scavengers, targeting weak points with surgical precision. But what really shocked him was the human heavy cruiser approaching the wounded dreadnought instead of finishing it off with long-range fire. The human ship was moving in close. "What are they doing?" he muttered. Answer came moments later. The human cruiser extended docking tubes toward the Vortok dreadnought's bridge section. It wasn't trying to destroy the ship. It was trying to capture it. "Boarding assault on Dominion's fist," reported communications. The humans are attempting to take the ship intact. This was beyond anything in Star's experience. Who captured dreadnoughts during active combat? The risk was enormous, the tactical value questionable unless they want our technology, he realized. They're not just trying to drive us off. They're trying to learn from us. The humans weren't just fierce fighters. They were adaptive learners. Every engagement taught them something new about Vorthak capabilities. Every captured ship gave them access to alien technology they could study and improve upon. Admiral, said his second in command, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. Our losses are becoming severe. Star looked at the tactical display. In 3 hours of fighting, he had lost 37 ships. The humans had lost only 5, and 2 of those were due to ramming attacks that took out much larger Vorthak vessels. But it wasn't just the numbers that worried him. It was the way the humans fought. They seemed to anticipate every Vorthak move, countering tactics that had worked for centuries against other species. Sir, called the sensor operator, I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the human carrier. Some Indomitable was charging its main batteries weapons. That looked more like the mass drivers used for launching cargo than proper military systems. The barrels were enormous, easily large enough to fire projectiles the size of shuttlecraft. What kind of ammunition are they using? Star asked. The answer came when the human ship fired, instead of explosive shells or energy beams, it launched what appeared to be solid chunks of metal, but these weren't ordinary projectiles. They were moving at nearly 10% of light speed. The first shot struck Blood's Edge, one of Star's heavy cruisers. The kinetic energy was so enormous that the ship simply came apart, its hull unable to contain the forces unleashed by the impact. Impossible, breathed the tactical officer. The energy requirements for such a shot should drain their entire power grid. But the humans fired again and again. Each shot was perfectly targeted, and each shot destroyed or crippled a Vorthak capital ship. Admiral, said communications urgently. Captain Vorthak reports that human soldiers have taken the Bridge of Void. Render, they're demanding his surrender. Star felt something he had never experienced in 40 years of conquest, the cold touch of defeat. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by opponents who refused to follow any known rules of engagement. Sir, said his second in command. Quietly, the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through. Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge. Vorthak fleet, this is your final warning. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions. Continue fighting and we will destroy every ship you have. Star wanted to reject the ultimatum. The hegemony did not surrender to inferior species, but as he watched another of his dreadnoughts break apart under human fire, he realized the truth. These weren't inferior species. These were predators from a world that had taught them to fight for survival every day of their existence. Admiral, whispered his tactical officer, we've lost over half our fleet. The remaining ships are requesting orders. Star closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he reached for the communications controls. Human fleet, this is Admiral Star. We surrender. I order all Vorthak ships to stand down and prepare for boarding. The bridge fell silent through the tactical display Star could see. His surviving ships powering down there. Weapons and engines, he had just become the first Vorthak admiral in history to surrender to an alien force, but as he watched human rescue ships moving toward his damaged vessels, he realized something else. These humans weren't just warriors, they were also healers. They were already working to save Vortak. Survivors. Perhaps there was more to learn from these Terrans than just how to fight. Dawn broke over Keltara Prime for the first time in 3 months without the sound of explosions. Ambassador Zixara stood in the ruins of her city breathing fresh air that no longer carried the smell of smoke and death. Around her, human soldiers worked alongside Keltaran civilians to clear rubble and set up medical stations. The contrast was striking. The elegant, blue-skinned Keltarans with their graceful movements and the stocky humans in their practical uniforms and heavy boots. Ambassador called a human medic, approaching with a wounded Keltaran child in her arms. Where should we take the injured? Zixara pointed toward the makeshift hospital they had established in what used to be the Grand Plaza. The doctors are working out of the old cultural center. Thank you for helping us. The medic, her name tape read Rodriguez, smiled and jogged toward the hospital. Like all the humans Zixara had met, she seemed to find nothing strange about risking her life for aliens she had never seen before. Ma'am, said General Mordak, approaching through the rubble. Admiral Chen is here to see you. Zixara turned to see the human admiral walking toward them. Chen looked tired. The battle had ended only 6 hours ago, and she had been working non-stop to coordinate relief efforts. Her uniform was dirty and torn, but her eyes were still alert. Admiral Zixara said, I don't know how to thank you. Your people have saved our world. Chen shrugged, a gesture Zixara was learning meant embarrassment or dismissal among humans. Just doing our job, ma'am. How are your people holding up? Better than we hoped. Your medical teams are remarkable. They've already treated more wounded than our own doctors could handle in weeks. It was true. Human medical technology was different from what the Keltarans were used to, but it was incredibly effective. Their field hospitals could perform surgeries that would have required major medical centers just days before. What about the Vorthak prisoners? Zixara asked. Chen's expression grew serious. We're holding them on our ships until the Galactic Confederation decides what to do with them. Admiral Crickster has been cooperative. I think yesterday taught him some things about humans he didn't expect to learn. Zixara had seen the recordings of Crickster's surrender. The proud Vorthak admiral had looked like a broken insect, his mandibles clicking in defeat, but she had also seen human medics treating wounded Vorthak soldiers with the same care they gave to Keltaran civilians. Admiral, she said carefully, may I ask you something? Of course. Why did you come? We sent distress calls to every major power in the galaxy. The Confederation said they were too busy. The Altarian Empire said we weren't important enough. The trading coalition calculated that saving us would cost more than we were worth, but you came from the other side of the galaxy to help people you'd never met. Why? Chen was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the damaged city. Human engineers were already working to restore power to the residential districts, their equipment humming as it repaired broken infrastructure. 300 years ago, Chen said finally, Earth was attacked by an alien species called the Kranar. They wanted our water and our mineral resources they didn't care that for. Billion humans lived on the planet. Zixara felt her skin pattern shift too. Colors of sympathy. What happened? We fought them with everything we had. Chemical rockets against plasma cannons. Kinetic weapons against energy shields. We lost 70% of our population before we managed to drive them off. Chen turned to look at Zixara directly. We sent distress calls to every species we could reach. You know what we heard back? Zixara already knew the answer, but she asked anyway. Nothing. Nothing. The Kranar were members of the Galactic Trade Network. Earth wasn't, so they civilized species decided it wasn't their problem. They let us fight and die alone because it was more convenient than getting involved. The anger in Chen's voice was carefully controlled, but Zixara could hear it clearly. We survived because we learned to be tougher than anyone expected. We built ships that could take damage and keep fighting. We developed weapons that could kill enemies twice our size. We trained our soldiers to never give up no matter what the odds. And when we heard your distress call, Chen continued, we remembered what it felt like to be alone and afraid. We remembered watching our cities burn while the galaxy looked the other way. So we decided that as long as humans draw breath, no one else would have to face extinction alone. Zixara felt tears forming in her eyes, a reaction that seemed to surprise the human admiral. You crossed half the galaxy to save strangers because you remembered being abandoned yourselves. Something like that, Chen said quietly. A young human soldier approached them, saluting Chen with crisp precision. Ma'am, we've received word from the fleet. The Confederation is sending a diplomatic mission to assess the situation on Kelthara Prime. Chen's smile was cold. How convenient. They couldn't spare a single ship to help when people were dying. But now that the fighting's over, they want to assess the situation. What will you tell them? Zixara asked. The truth, that we responded to a distress call from a species under attack, that we eliminated the threat according to standard self-defense protocols, that we're providing humanitarian aid to the survivors. The human soldier handed Chen a data pad. Ma'am, we're also receiving requests from 17 different worlds asking if the Terran Defense Force would be willing to establish mutual defense agreements. Chen raised an eyebrow. 17. Yes, ma'am. Word is spreading about what happened. Here, a lot of species are realizing that the Confederation's protection isn't as reliable as they thought. Zixara wasn't surprised. For centuries, the galaxy had been dominated by a few major powers who decided which species were worth protecting and which weren't. But now there was an alternative, a species that would fight for anyone who asked for help. Admiral, she said, what happens now? Will your fleet stay? Chen shook her head. We'll leave a medical ship and some engineers to help with rebuilding. But the main fleet needs to return to human space. We've been away from home for 3 months, and there are other places that might need our help. She paused, looking thoughtful. But if you're interested, I'm authorized to offer Kelthara Prime a mutual defense treaty with the Terran Federation. We can't promise to stop every threat, but we can promise that you'll never face one alone again. What would such a treaty require? Zixara asked. Not much. We're not interested in controlling other species or taking their resources. We just want to make sure that what happened to Earth never happens to anyone else. Zixara thought about the past 3 months. The terror, the despair, the certainty that her people were going to die alone and forgotten. Then she thought about human soldiers sharing their rations with Keltharan children, and human doctors working through the night to save alien lives. I'll need to discuss it with our government, she said, but I think you'll find Kelthara very interested in such an agreement. Chen smiled, the first genuine smile Zixara had seen from her. Good, we could use more friends in this part of the galaxy. As the human admiral walked away to check on the relief efforts, Zixara looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, human ships were patrolling the edge of the system, making sure no more threats approach Kelthara Prime. For the first time in months, she felt truly safe. Within a year, the Terran Defense Force had established recruitment stations on 17 worlds. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson about the humans. They were a species that would cross any distance and face any odds to help those in need. And sometimes when civilized species calculated costs and weighed benefits, when empires debated politics and considered profit margins, the answer would come howling out of the void on ships with names like Indomitable, Relentless, and Never Again. The humans had a simple philosophy that shocked the galaxy in its directness. Nobody fights alone. Not while humanity drew breath.